Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for tuning in to College Football Across the Nation, Episode 4. This is our one-month anniversary show. Big deal. Thank you for making us part of your day and tuning in. I, as always, am your host, Phil Nunziata. With me, as always, is the co-host, Ryan Mock, brought to you on Spreaker.com in association with National Sports. Now, Ryan, we had a big week of college football transpire in Week 2. Nothing bigger, as we jump right into it, than the Miami Hurricanes having what most people deem as an upset against number 12th ranked Florida Gators.
Well, it was a huge win for Miami. Probably the biggest win Miami's had in definitely a few years. To be able to beat Florida, like we say in Florida, we touched on it last week, recruiting is such a huge thing for the Florida schools, and that's only going to help Miami going down the road. A lot of people can say Florida didn't play their best ball. They gave them the game, but at the end of the day, Miami did what they had to do with the circumstances. It's a huge win for the Hurricanes.
Well, let's dive into the logistics of this game. You mentioned there was some people thinking that Florida kind of gave them this game, and rightfully so for them to think this way. They had a lot of turnovers. The quarterback Driscoll had 3 himself, 2 interceptions and a fumble. One of those interceptions coming in the red zone. The other Miami coming out great on defense. Their first offensive possession for Florida, the ball was fumbled away next to a big hit on defense. What do you make of some of those questionable calls going for it on 4th down in the red zone for Florida?
It's almost like Florida maybe was disrespecting Miami, thinking, we can play sloppy football and just go in there and we're better. We got better athletes, they could say, and it felt me watching it looked like Florida wasn't really taking them serious. And Miami proved right at the bat in the first drive they set the tone on defense. A big turnover causing the fumble, and Miami's defense. You can say Florida played bad all game. Yeah, they probably did on offense, but Miami's defense came with huge turnovers and none bigger than the one late in the fourth quarter that iced the game. Florida has to regroup after this, and they can't play sloppy football. They just do not have enough firepower to make all these crazy calls, especially on the road, to overcome it. And it proved bad for the Gators this game.
Yeah, we touched on it last week that the Gators tend to play in sloppy football games, and we both mentioned earlier that might not be able the way to get it done in this game. The Gators were 1 of 6 in the red zone, which you're not going to get it done, with that kind of production.
Yeah, you got to put points on the board when you get in the red zone on the road, especially.
Yeah, the way I looked at it, I just think this game mattered more to the Hurricanes. They had their first sellout in ever. That place was popping down there at the Orange Bowl, and I think it's just a big win. And maybe on the larger scale, we have back-to-back weeks where we have ACC teams beating SEC teams. We've touched on this past couple weeks, but does this prove even more that gap might be closing with other conferences?
It seems to me, especially, it seems like the SEC schools, if they make mistakes, they can't overcome them as much as they could in years past and just have better athletes. It seems that maybe the ACC is the conference that's starting to catch up to the SEC. And it's a huge win. That's 2 weeks in a row we've had a top 15 program go down to an ACC school. It is a huge win, and we'll just have to see what happens down the road for the SEC. But I think the ACC is catching up to the SEC.
I think you mentioned the SEC at times. They just feel that they can flip the switch late in the game simply because they have better athletes. I think I saw Florida kind of attempt to do that at one point. Like Miami seemed to have the lead, and then they block a punt. And a lot of people felt like, okay, here's Florida rallying back. But, they waited a little too long. Maybe that switch isn't as powerful, at least against this team, that they might have thought. I mean, I'm not going to get too overhyped about this game. I thought it was a great game. I was very happy for Miami. It proved how much this team has come. But when you really look at the logistics of it, the Gators had 6 turnovers, and the Canes won by 5 points. So, this was not an overpowering victory, but they did what was needed to get done. Not something I'm going to overreact to, and I don't think they will either, but it's definitely a huge step in the right direction.
It is a huge step, and like I said, it's starting to look like the SEC schools in Florida, you can't make the mistakes and just get away with it. They have to play clean ball on the road, and Florida did not do that, and Miami took full advantage of it. Florida's defense, they looked great. They're flying around all day. Miami's offense, they held Stephen Morris they had kept him in check all day. But Miami, it's a big win for them. They'll definitely get recruits out of this. They have a ways to go on offense to play the best teams probably in the SEC and move the ball on them consistently. But if you make mistakes, they prove that they're going to bite you, and that's what they did last week.
Yeah, Miami's offense definitely took a sputter in that second half, totaling under 100 yards for the whole second half. So the Gators definitely started to get back on track. But like you said, I feel like Miami just did enough to win. 6 turnovers by 5 points. It's one of those things. It's like they did what was needed, but they could definitely have played a more complete game.
Oh, they could have. I'm sure Miami will go over the film and look what they can improve on. There's a lot of things. I mean, I've seen Florida coming free off the edge, bringing the blitz, getting to Stephen Morris. Their running game, every time they hand it off to Duke Johnson, it seemed like he was stuffed right in his tracks. Florida was able to stack the box on Miami, and they weren't able to beat their one-on-one matchups on the outside. Miami, like I said, they got a lot of work to do offensively. I thought they'd probably have to be a little bit better on offensively, but Florida has a heck of a defense. You can argue it's the best defense in the nation. The offense for the Gators is just they turn the ball over. They're sloppy. They have penalties. Whenever they seem to get going, they get in their own way, and they didn't get away with it this time.
Well, needless to say, though, it was a big win for Miami. Here's a team that's not only trying to prove, in the national, in the national spotlight, but this is a team that's still going for its first ACC championship. It's kind of humorous to think that Miami basketball has won more ACC championships than Miami football. It's
crazy. They never even played for an ACC championship. Last year they could have, but they had their self-proposed ban of postseason play. They could have last year, but the record wasn't good last year. It was the Coastal Division of the ACC was so weak, and having Georgia Tech play for it. So legitimately, Miami's been down for a number of years. They haven't been the typical U. But if they start getting momentum, we've seen in the past what Miami can do down there, bringing in recruits. It's a hotbed for young talent. And a huge win like this, they got some bigger games on the road. They go to Doak Campbell and play Florida State in November. That's a huge game in Florida. But for right now, that's going to help them. If kids are on the brink, they want Florida or Miami, they go to this game, they see what the Canes can do, especially at home for Miami, and they can pack that place out. That's big. Kids like to play in big environments.
It's a pro stadium.
And it's huge for Miami. You can't say enough about what this win does for the program moving forward.
And somewhere out there, Jimmy Johnson, Michael Irvin, and others are smiling.
Oh, there's a lot of happy Canes, I can tell you that. You see them all over the place in the NFL and on TV. A huge win for the Hurricanes.
The next big game that we moved on to was the ending of a great rivalry. We touched on it last week. Now we're going to get to the ending portions of it. Number 4 Notre Dame falling to number 17 Michigan. And this was a game where we mentioned, Notre Dame's coach Brian Kelly saying this is not that big of a rivalry. And, we both predicted that Michigan was going to show them that they were wrong. And it was not more apparent than on Saturday night.
Yeah, Michigan came out flying around. Notre Dame made mistakes, and they took full advantage of it. It's what they get, in my opinion. You can't go into a rivalry game saying it's not a rivalry game, especially on the road in Ann Arbor. That place was cranking. College game day was there. Michigan was fired up, and they went out there and took care of business. Notre Dame's going to have to try to regroup next week when they play Purdue, but it was a big win for Michigan in Ann Arbor.
I think there needs to be more night games in Michigan. They've only recently started to do that, and I think that place just has a different atmosphere when they do things like that.
It does. It's the sea of yellow, and I don't know. It just does seem like Michigan's fans get up for the game more when it's at night. So you got a good point there.
I mean, being a season ticket holder of a college team myself, when you have to wait all day, when you get to tailgate all day, going to a game, it makes the crowd that much better. I mean, the anticipation is almost too much to bear sometimes. But, you look at the stats of this game, and, Gardner from Michigan was on it. My favorite thing about this, taking away from his stat numbers, I don't know what the reason was for this. Anyone that may know can comment or let us know. But their quarterback wore number 98 in this game. I'm not sure what that was about, but I loved it. I'm not sure what the point of this was.
I think it might have been honoring a former player. I'm not exactly sure. But that's my best guess. Sometimes college, especially Michigan, in a school like that, so much prestige and tradition, that's my best bet why they did it.
I think more quarterbacks should wear jersey numbers in the 90s. I think it's a good look.
Well, we can say this, Phil. He's the fastest number 98 I've ever seen.
That's a good point. But Gardner, you can't really take much away from him. He was on fire in this game. 21 of 33, 294 yards, 4 touchdowns, a nearly perfect game other than 1 interception thrown. And he was clearly the team, the man that put the team on his back and really pushed them through to this big win for Michigan.
Devin Gardner is a big reason why, in my opinion, Michigan is probably maybe the most underrated team in the nation, and I think they're better than Ohio State. He's proven in tough games and tough environments when it gets tough. He made a big mistake there late in the game, he ran backwards, could have taken the safety, threw the ball up crazily, picked it off. Notre Dame got a touchdown out of it. but he came right back and led his team down the field. That last drive, I mean, a lot of people can say, yeah, the referees got involved. Notre Dame, when it was a 34-30 game, Notre Dame was trying to hold him to a field goal, and Devin Gardner rushed him right down the field, hit a big third down completion, got a touchdown, and he's opening eyes in Michigan. It's what they need if they want to continue forward with this run that they're on. And for Notre Dame, I mean, Tommy Rees, 29 of 51. That's a lot of passing attempts on the road in a hostile environment.
Yeah, 51 attempts in the Big House is usually not, what you want to do. You want this team to have a little bit more of a balanced attack, and you look at, everyone that took snaps to run for Notre Dame, and they do not total 100 yards. But speaking of rushing yards, David Gardner making plays with his feet, totaling 82 rushing yards and a touchdown on the ground. He was just everywhere and scored any way possible.
He was able to control the game, control the clock. Notre Dame's defense is on the field a lot, and especially with Notre Dame, when you're throwing 51 times and you put in all the rushing yards at Michigan, as a time of possession isn't going to look good. Your defense is going to get worn out. When you're in a hostile environment on the road, you have to run the football. Yeah, it's old school, but you got to run the football on the road to win. And Michigan was able to do that. They played smart. They came out fired up, and it was a big win. Notre Dame, you got to have some balance on your offense if you want to win on the road in a hostile environment like Michigan was.
Yeah, I think we both are in agreement here. I feel that Michigan, I think Northwestern has a shot just on what's been going on with them lately, but this team might be the most talented in the Big Ten.
Yeah, they're gaining steam every week, and I think come week 6, week 7, you'll see the maize and blue on a lot of talk shows, a lot of TV shows, ESPN, and getting the credit they deserve. And I can't wait to see what they can do down the road. I think they're the best team in the Big Ten. That's my opinion. I think they got the most explosive quarterback. I think he's better than Braxton Millen, in my opinion. I think their offense is better. I think their defense probably is better. Ohio State got 20 to Buffalo at home. I see sluggish play more out of Ohio State. I know they got Urban Meyer, but it just seems to me that Brady Hoke has Michigan fired up. Everybody's believing in his system now, and a few years for Brady Hoke, and it seems like this year they're taking advantage of it and getting full steam moving forward.
And it really says a lot to Gardner's credit that, he can replace a guy like Denard Robinson who, given, he did not go pro as a quarterback, but he was a very special player. He did things that, people don't normally see. And to really just jump right in and to keep this team on the track that they're on really speaks volume of his character and what he does for that team. Yeah,
absolutely. I think he deserves more credit across the nation, and it'll happen in time. The more and more big wins he gets, Michigan's they're a program that people pay attention to. Once it gets going, he'll get more recognition he deserves. And Brady Hoke, you can't say enough about how he's turned Michigan back into a powerhouse. And I think they're a top 10 team in my opinion.
Well, they definitely got to be close after beating a number 14th ranked team. You move on to two teams that were in the top 15 here, a big SEC war. Number 6 at the time, South Carolina versus the number 11 Georgia Bulldogs. And this, you look at this game, this was got to be, Aaron Murray's coming out party against the Gamecocks.
Yeah, it was a big win for him. A lot of people say Aaron Murray doesn't step up in the big games. Yeah, he gets close, but he can't quite get over that hump. He was able to do that in Athens on Saturday. And we said it after they lost to Clemson, Georgia still has everything in front of them. They can still win the SEC East. They can still win the SEC. They can still go to the national championship if they run the table. Their schedule, it's hellacious. But it's a big step to get momentum going forward for the Dogs.
Yeah, and they really didn't bat an eye in this game. Georgia went up 17-3, thinking, okay, this is the game that it happens, and then you blink and it's back tied to 17. But he was never phased. He just kept trucking along, built that lead, made a lot of big throws in the fourth quarter to pull that lead a little bit farther away. He didn't get the lead and make his defense win the game. He kept on it and gave them even more of a lead, which really helped, later on down the road. With South Carolina, they've known it all too well in years where they've beaten Georgia, but Georgia's still gone on to win, that side of the SEC. So they knew going into this game this was a big one. South Carolina, we talk about praising Aaron Murray, but it seems a debacle for Jadeveon Clowney is still happening here. He did have a sack in this game, but still limited to 4 tackles and not, he shouted out to his coaches after the game saying they need to play him at a different position because they're just running away from him, from the ball. Things are just going from bad to worse for the South Carolina star.
Yeah, the skepticism for Clowney isn't going to get, you're not going to hear the whispers getting any quieter after this week. mean, he's calling out his coaches after the game. Maybe what he's saying is true. A lot of teams are going to run away from him because he's such a dominant player. But if he's the player that everybody was thinking he was coming into the season, all Heisman hopeful, he's the best player in America, you're going to have to make plays regardless of the circumstances. The great ones show up no matter what. The game's on the line. And he just forgot about him. Georgia was able to dictate everything. He wasn't able to get any big sacks at crucial times. Right when South Carolina got back in the game, Aaron Murray was able to sit back and had a clean pocket. And you got to look through, man, where's Clowney getting the pressure off the edge in the big moment? He didn't do it. And I think it's safe to say all the Heisman hype for him is probably going down the window. South Carolina's defense didn't show up at all, giving up 41 to Georgia. And Clowney's going to get a lot of skepticism after this one, especially after his first week against North Carolina and coming up and backing it up with a subpar performance in a huge game in Georgia. And,
really the big moment of that game, if you want to look back on it, Davion Clowney does get a rush, and Aaron Murray, jukes him out, runs left, and throws a strike downfield. That was really the deciding play of that game. So, if anything, he's in that game-defining moment for the wrong reasons, and you don't want to see a lot of that. And as you mentioned before, as a big player, yeah, they're going to game plan around you, but that's the difference on defense and really offense also. If you game plan around one person, if you're good, you can game plan around a good player, but you really can't do anything about a great player. Like, you look back to last year, Monte Teo, before all the drama came out with him, here's a guy, they did not run to him for him to get tackles and interception. He flew to the football. He made himself be in the right position. It wasn't always what was drawn up. There's a reason that he was in the Heisman candidacy towards the end. There's a reason he went to New York to possibly and finish second place. When you're on defense, if you're going to try and win the Heisman, you got to put yourself in that situation. You cannot blame the coaches for the play call. It's more of an instinctive thing. You need to put yourself in the right positions to make plays.
Yeah, it's just a bunch of excuses, if you ask me, for Clowney right now. I mean, Lawrence Taylor, do you think the NFL teams didn't game plan to stop him? I mean, Reggie White, you think they didn't game plan to stop him? Of course they're getting double teamed, those guys, and they still made plays. Granted, Clowney's just in college, that's a different story, but you have to step up regardless of what happens. You have to be the leader of your team. And I would like to see with Clowney, it seems like when things aren't going down, the thing that I've noticed, when things aren't going right for South Carolina's defense, he doesn't gather his troops around. He doesn't fire him up. He doesn't get them ready to go. It seems like he goes on the bench and just sits by himself and it looks mad. And you don't know what's being said in the locker room, but he needs to gather his troops because, like I said, with Georgia, yeah, this is SEC loss, but they're still where they want to be. Georgia's got a heck-acious schedule, guys. I mean, if they run the tail down the road, I mean, they're going to be in the national championship. South Carolina, they still can. They don't control their own destiny, but it's still a great shot at them getting where they want to go. And if South Carolina is going to do what they want to do, they got to get Clowney to probably be more of a leader, to step up in the big games. And he hasn't done that so far, and it's going to be key to South Carolina down the stretch because he's their backbone. He's the face of their program. Clowney is, when you think South Carolina, you think of him. And if he's not playing big in big moments and big games, it's not going to bar well for South Carolina down the road.
Yeah, overall, it's hard to, you try to be objective when you do, shows and things of this nature. But I was really cheering for Aaron Murray to finally have his defining moment. And, we touched on this just talking before the show. Having a 300-yard passing game when only completing 17 passes, that's quite a feat. That's how you know he was pushing the ball downfield. He didn't settle for short passes. He really stretched his defense and got what he wanted out of it.
Yeah, he was able to come up big, and like you say, he was getting the ball down the field. You credit Georgia getting open, and of course their offensive line giving him the time. But it was huge for Aaron Murray. This is the first of many this year. He's going to have a lot of big games down the road. They control their own destiny now in the SEC East. So the critics, it silences for a week, but it's still going to be there down the road because Georgia's got a lot of tough games. But for right now, it was a big game for Aaron Murray. You got to feel happy for him because it seems like a lot of the critics get on him when Georgia doesn't win these big games, and he usually plays pretty good.
Right.
It's just this week, like you said, that play with Clowney. It was Clowney Murray who's going to step up, and Murray was the man that did it. And it's a big, big thing for Aaron Murray moving forward, and confidence for this whole football team that they can beat these teams in the big games when everybody's watching them. And you got to feel good for Mark Richt, and you got to feel good for Aaron Murray for beating South Carolina on Saturday.
Yeah, and as far as rushing, yards for this game, both teams had a running back go well over 100 yards, and they had another, someone else, Connor Shaw for South Carolina picking up 75 rushing yards himself. It seems that the rushing yards almost canceled themselves out, and then it became quarterback versus quarterback, much like the Clemson game. This time, Murray getting the better of it. We move here from a game, that had a lot of praise for one team to one that really puts a program a few steps back. And, of course, we're talking about the upset win for BYU over Texas Longhorns this past week in a game that, was just very, interesting to watch as, an eye-popping stat here is Texas gave up 512 rushing yards, which, of course, led to their defensive coordinator being fired. Ryan, where do the Horns go from here? This is something they did not see coming.
Phil, that's going to be tough. 512 yards of rushing. University of Texas got 512 goddamn yards of rushing? That's just unacceptable. I'm sorry. Yeah, their defensive coordinator deserves to be fired. I'm sorry. I mean, that's disgraceful for the Longhorns. This isn't Texas football. Yeah, the hot seat, if it was hot for Mac Brown before, there's got to be a fire lit under him, and he can't sit down because it is going to get hotter and hotter. They did not look prepared on defense at all. I mean, they gave up 200 yards rushing to the quarterback. I mean, that's just unacceptable. Mm-hmm. And, folks, they played Ole Miss next week. They're number 25 team in the nation.
Yeah, it's not going to get any easier moving on.
They fired their defensive coordinator. Where are their mindset going into this game? It's at home. Sometimes when you go at home, you're like, oh, that can help you. And sometimes it can hurt you. You see your fans booing you. They're not going to be up. They're going to be very, very PO during this game, the fans. And if they don't get off to a fast start, it's just going to get worse for Texas. They need somebody to step up and lead this team, because you think of Texas, who's their leaders? You can't think of one. Like the Oregon's, you can think of Mariota. You go to Alabama, you think of their quarterback, their running back. Everybody's a leader. For Texas, you can't think of one player and single him out. This guy where they can lay their hat on, and they got to do something. David Ash, he's hit or miss. It wasn't really their offense's fault this week.
Yeah, their offense
40 points.
Yeah, their offense played fairly well. I mean, you look at David Ash here, 19 to 34. He definitely had to put up the ball a lot considering they were, behind in this game. But 251 yards, 2 touchdowns, no turnovers for him or Chase McCoy, who got in, late in the game for a little while. The offense played, when you're Texas, you should be able to score you should be able to score 21 points and not, lose by 19. Like, that should not be something that happens there. I mean, 21 points for a number 15 ranked team's defense should be enough to get you the win against a team like BYU.
Yeah, and BYU the week before played at Virginia and scored 14 points and struggled to move the ball all day. BYU's not Oregon out here rushing the ball. Mm-hmm. I mean, they're a solid program. Don't get me wrong. They disrespected BYU and the job they do out there in Provo, always having a respectable program. But this is Texas Longhorns we're talking about here, and you're giving up 512 yards of rushing alone. That's just unbelievable to me. And there's no Heisman hopefuls doing it for BYU. It's just Texas not being prepared, not being in the right spot, not being mentally focused. That's the only thing you can put this up to. You can't give up that many yards rushing and expect nothing to just look past it. They need to step up big. And Texas is sliding down and down and down ever since they lost Colt McCoy. It seems like, yeah, the wind was taken out of their sails in that national championship game against Alabama when Colt McCoy went out. And it seems it hasn't gotten back for this program. It's like that was such a heartbreaker. They haven't been able to regroup. And each year, and this is the year Texas was supposed to be good. They're supposed to be back. They're supposed to win the Big 12. They had 19 returning starters this season, and
a lot of people did have them picked to win the Big 12, and that just doesn't seem very plausible now.
Yeah, they can still win the Big 12 because it's winning the Big 12 game, but no, what do you say? That doesn't. I don't see Texas having a good year from here on out. That's just my opinion. When you just gotta wonder where their mindset's gonna be moving forward. This was an embarrassment, probably the most embarrassing loss that Mac Brown's had in his tenure at Texas.
And what do you think? Not necessarily record-wise, but if you have a record, that's good too. What is it going to take to save Mac Brown's job? You say he's firmly on the hot seat right now. What's it going to take to keep him there? Because he's a guy, he's had a lot of success over there, won national championships, but that can only keep you so long after the fact. It's what have you done for me lately You hear that a lot in sports. What's it going to take to keep him there?
Well, first of all, they got to beat Oklahoma. If they take another butt whooping to Oklahoma, what they've done the last 2 or 3 seasons, the game's being over by halftime. You can't do that when you're at Texas. You got to beat Oklahoma. I think they'll have to regroup and win the Big 12. And I don't know if that's going to happen the way that they looked last week against BYU. They're going to be in the hot seat. When I say it's hot, I think it's burning, and Mac Brown feels it. I mean, he's sweating bullets because he knows what they're going to have to do and the expectations are. And the way they're looking like right now, I don't see it happening. They're going to have to beat Oklahoma, have to win the Big 12. Anything short of that, I don't see Mac Brown being at Texas much longer.
Quick rapid-fire question. Who's more on the hot seat? Mac Brown, Texas, Lane Kiffin, USC?
I would say Mac Brown just because he's been there, done that, and once your time passes, we've seen it before, Texas is tired of it. I think Lane Kiffin has more time to get his schemes in. Mac Brown, I say, for Texas is on the hot seat more than Lane Kiffin.
I might have to put Lane Kiffin a little bit higher for the same reason you picked, but using it in a different way. You know, Mac Brown has won championships there before. There's reasons to keep him around. Lane Kiffin, he's done nothing but underperform since he's been there. This is a team that started number 1 preseason overall last year and finished not ranked. You know, that's a hell of a way to fall in your USC. Much like Texas, they don't take losing very kindly in either place. So, you know, for me, I think it might be Lane Kiffin just because, you know, he has not succeeded at any point, whereas Mac Brown at least has a history that he can maybe lean on. Obviously, he can only lean on it for so long, but I think both these teams got to turn around. Which team out of those two you think has a better chance of turning it around?
I would say Texas because Ash is more experienced. He's been in more big games. I mean, USC, I watched their game against Washington State last week, and they looked awful. I mean, 10-7. They're complete more passes to Washington State than they were their receivers. They couldn't get no passes on the field, and when they did complete a pass, it was for 3 yards in a cloud of dust. I'd say probably Texas moving forward, just because they got more senior leadership that they maybe can lean on. Somebody's got to step up. USC, I don't see it. I think Texas has more depth than USC still, and I think they're both in big trouble, but I have to say Texas by a slight edge over the Trojans.
Yeah, I agree. I think they got a better chance turning around simply because I feel like the team is more. They're going to have to buy in more now with the new defensive coordinator coming in and everything for Texas. But with USC, I think Lane Kiffin's been there long enough to install his ideals and his systems, and I don't think it's really worked too much. I mean, we'll see what happens this year. But overall, I think Texas has a better chance, but both teams really need to make some changes quickly. So we move on now from all the games of last week to now we're getting into what we're going to see this weekend, and no game is bigger, really this season on a regular season schedule, than we have the rematch from last year that really set Johnny Football ablaze. We have Texas A&M, the number 6 ranked Aggies, against the big dog, number 1 Alabama Crimson Tide. Rematch from last year. Ryan, takes away. Where do you want to start with this one?
You got to start with Johnny Football. What's he going to do? We talked about him last week. Like I said, he's probably going to be in bed. I wonder how I'm going to get to Alabama this week. And we joked around about that. But whenever you're talking about Texas A&M, you got to tell Johnny Football, you got the Crimson Tide coming in too. You can't look past them. I can't wait to watch it. Personally, a lot of people think that Alabama's probably going to come in there and walk over him. I don't see it happening. No. I think Texas A&M's going to be fired up. I see a 4-quarter war, and I cannot wait to watch this game.
Yeah, I mean, you look at this game, you know, obviously what really sets it up is, you know, A&M beating Bama last year, and if it not for Ohio State being on a bowl ban, that would have kept them out of the national championship. And I think Bama fans are, maybe not their fans, but the program is smart enough to know that. They see the big picture, and they realize, you know, what that could have really meant to them, you know, in the long run. But you look at Nick Saban, and over the course of his career, he is 7-1 against teams that he lost to the year before. So here's a guy that really takes losing to heart. And, of course, the only team that he lost to twice in a row is LSU, and there's never, of course, anything wrong with that. It's a solid program. But, you know, you look at this game, and, you know, I think if it comes down to the 2 quarterbacks, you got to think Manziel is able to make more plays. So, really, what else is going to have to factor into this game?
Well, I agree with you there. I think Johnny Manziel is going to be more of a factor. I think Alabama, they're going to want to prove that they can run the ball after their lackluster performance against Virginia Tech in Week 1. I think Johnny Football listen, more of the burden's probably going to have to be on Manziel to do more than than McCarron. But you think of this, though, it really scares you if you're Texas A&M. Nick Saban, he's been looking forward to this since last year. He's looking forward to this before. He looked, all right, we're going to play Texas A&M when the schedule came out. And he got an extra week to prepare. They played Virginia Tech in the first game of the season that Thursday, and they've got ample enough time to prepare for Texas A&M. And you know how good and how well coached Alabama is, especially in the big game. You're going to have to do something to match that. Maybe throw some wrinkles in if you're Texas A&M. You can't come out and probably run the same schemes. You want to play your style of ball, but you got to change it up a little bit, different packages and different schemes, because Alabama's going to be able to key on it because they've had so much time to prepare. That's inside. Well, let's see what Kevin Sumlin, he's going to have to make his money against Nick Saban. If they want to compete with the big dog, they got to beat the big dog, and this is their big chance in Texas A&M this Saturday.
Yeah, I mean, you look offensively, and A&M's definitely got the advantage. Over these past two games, Bama, of course, going 2-0, but they've averaged only a little over 200 yards of offense total. A&M's close to 600. They're over double in yardage, and you look at the stats for, this is 2 games in, and there's really not a lot to be shown for Alabama stats. I mean, Aaron Murray, or A.J. McCarron, excuse me, we've already talked about Aaron Murray. He's often been talked about as a game manager, but the game really hasn't gone their way. They're not doing what they want. They're doing enough to win, but their game plan isn't really, manifesting itself through the course of these first 2 games, where I think the big difference with Manziel, we mentioned before, we're talking about Clowney and everything, you can game plan for a good player, but you can't really game plan against a great player like Manziel because what he does isn't in the playbook in the first place. You can't stop something that he thinks of on the fly. It's almost back, I can't compare these two, but it's like when Michael Vick was in college. Half the things you saw him do wasn't in the playbook. It was just something that happened on the fly. You can't coach instincts, and you can't coach against it really either.
Yeah, some players have the it factor, and Johnny Football definitely has the it factor. Yeah, and thinking about this game, I've been going back and forth with what I think is going to win. I can't make a decision right now. I'm leaning maybe towards the tie just because I had an extra week to prepare, and how dangerous that can be. But I know how dangerous Johnny Football can be too, and they're at home, and the emotions are going to be crazy. And all this publicity, negative publicity that A&M has had, if they can turn that into a positive and just get it all out of them in one huge game with a national audience looking on, could really do a lot for this program. It's a huge game for both teams. Alabama wanting to prove that, their first game against Virginia Tech was just a lackluster performance. They still won 35-10, but they had 3 touchdowns not from their offense. They're going to have to run the ball. They're going to want to do that. But if A&M can stop it, it's going to be huge. I would say maybe Bama by a field goal, maybe because they gave them extra time to prepare. They can shock them. But I would not be surprised to see this turn the other way around.
Yeah, I think it's really a toss-up at this point. I mean, I have to give a slight edge to A&M considering they're at home, and, Manziel, he's out to prove a little bit more even than last year. Because, as long as Manziel's winning, people are okay with him doing what he's doing. When he starts to losing, people are going to have a lot more problems with the way he acts and the way he, conducts himself around that program. So I might have to give a slight edge to A&M, but, we're going to have to tune in. I think it's going to be a great game, no matter what.
Oh, yeah, it'll be a great atmosphere in College Station on Saturday.
Now we're going to move over to one of the more significant injuries in the past from this past week. We moved to Ohio State. They're having a game. They're winning fairly comfortably against San Diego State 42-7. But the big problem there is Braxton Miller was taken out of the game early and, was not able to return. And he is questionable for the Cal game coming up. And, it could be a situation. I don't think he's in any danger of losing his job for when he comes back. I think Urban Meyer has too much trust in him to really. I think they're going to try and play safe from then on. But how big of a loss is this if he's out for, more than a week or two?
Well, this is huge for Ohio State moving forward. They need Braxton Miller. He is the most explosive player on the field for the Buckeyes. And Phil, this is my upset pick of the week.
Upset alert.
Just to let y'all know,
upset alert.
I happen to have California in this game. From the East Coast going all the way to the West Coast, California. I see Cal win. That's just, but maybe what you're saying about Braxton Miller, it's going to be huge. I don't know how injured he is, but when you think about Ohio State, you think about Braxton Miller. Past that, you don't think of any other great playmaker. And Ohio State, to me, is looked sluggish. They really did against Buffalo. I see Cal beating them in this game. Call me crazy, but that's just what I think.
Well, I think it's pretty apparent. I don't believe he's going to play in this game. Obviously, they bring in, backup Kenny Glutton, who, for those that did not catch the game, played fairly well, West San Diego State. But yeah, 152 yards passing, 83 yards rushing, including a 43-yard touchdown run. He's a very similar player to Braxton. It's almost like Braxton Miller hitting the reset button. He's a young player. It's almost like Braxton Miller without the experience when you look at the way he'd be used in this offense.
Yeah, I could see that. And for the Buckeyes as a whole, you're going to see if they can answer adversity. They're losing their Heisman hopeful quarterback, Braxton Miller. A lot of people had him before the season as one of those. You're going to see how they can regroup around it. They're going to have to play good defense. The system, they'll fit in just fine. I think Urban Meyer will do a good job of coaching them. I think Ohio State will be ready to play. I just got Cal beating them in a close one. I don't know, just a gut feeling on this one. I haven't been still on Ohio State all year. They got to prove more to me. They have a chance this week if they can if they can do what they need to do and beat Cal on the road. I'm going to be tuned into it and be paying attention to this game.
Well, Cal coming off only a 7-point win over Portland State last year, but you look at the statistics of this team, they are first in the country in passing yards with 472 per game. So really, it will be a lot on Ohio State's defense to be able to stop this passing attack. They have a very deep receiving core, very young and explosive. But you heard it here first, upset alert. Ryan has Cal beating Buckeyes with Braxton Miller in his absence. Now we look over, we've had enough, with some of these games here, and there's been a few other off-the-field storylines, which, frankly, I really hate taking up airtime to talk about things like this, but it's become part of the game now, and it's really something that needs to be taken into account. It's even spread to SEC teams such as Mississippi State, Alabama, and Tennessee. Nick Saban's really shut down any talk amongst his players or any of the media around the Alabama area for that. But really, the big focus for what's gone on recently is with the Oklahoma State Cowboys, and there's been a lot of things that have popped out in so far 3 of a 5-part series being released on ESPN about just a lot of scrutiny, a lot of illegal procedures going on at Oklahoma State, and it's really interesting for a team that has already had bad on-the-field issues, of course, losing to an FCS opponent, knocking them out of the top 25 to start the season. And now this, what do you see happening here with Oklahoma State?
That's crazy. This came out of nowhere. I mean, Coach Mike Gundy for Oklahoma State's had them pretty respectable over the last few years. They've beaten Oklahoma, and there's a lot of positives coming out of Oklahoma State. They always have a high-powered offense, and this is just crazy. I don't know why they feel the need to do this as long as any other team in the country. It reminds me a lot of what Miami was doing. Paying players, using prostitution, all this stuff. It's really bad for the game. And if you want to hit a program, hit them for something like this, not the little tiny stuff like Manziel and all this stuff, like what they did with Des Bryant a few years at Oklahoma State. This is where the NCAA really needs to make a statement to one of these programs that we're not going to allow this to keep happening and even think about it. They need to really seriously think about what these teams are doing, take the accusations. The NCAA is under a lot of scrutiny for how they handled the Miami scandal. They need to make it a statement to one of these programs doing all this ridiculous stuff that's not going to fly, and it's going to hurt you for many years to come. So everybody else in the nation can see, hey, if we do this, it's not going to be pretty.
Yeah, whenever you talk about punishments for allegations for illegal things, obviously, to the extreme, to the 10th power, of course, people will talk about SMU and the death penalty. And, of course, the closest thing we've seen to that is what's been done to Penn State, unjustifiably so, in my opinion. But you look at both of those, and, that's about as worse as we've seen. We've seen SMU completely lose football, and then we've also seen Penn State almost left for dead, obviously, with a great coach like Bill O'Brien. They're not going quietly, and it's really great to see. But those are the 2 worst things we've seen here. And those have both been from... Penn State was from an isolated incident. SMU is a lot more comparable to this, because this is something that's happened over many years, and multiple multiple things have happened. There's been reports of players buying and selling drugs, going as from marijuana to stuff a lot more severe. There's also been reports of players being illegally deemed eligible to play, even though their grades were not as such. And there's even been players that have pointed out, Oklahoma State at one point, obviously a very big, powerhouse team for a little bit. Team, there's reports that they would, have, drugs, marijuana, and go out and play in these games against teams that, in their words, they knew they would roll over. And, that, to me, that's the most, disturbing thing of any of this, because they're endangering themselves, and they're also endangering the teams they're playing.
And you've had a lot of kids come out and say a lot of this stuff has happened. It's not just a few things here and there or little rumors. No, the numbers against Oklahoma State is not good. I've seen a lot of players come and say, yeah, this actually took place at Oklahoma State. You can't allow this stuff to happen in the college game. It's not what the game stands about. And like I said, I think the NCAA is going to have to come down hard on them. I hate to see a program get left to dead. Don't give them the death penalty. That's a little extreme. But they need to have something happen to them where this isn't going to happen around the nation. And the NCAA sees one team get hit hard, like a team like Oklahoma State, a great program, and they're not going to do these kind of things. And if it comes out, they know that it's not going to be good for them. So, like I said, Oklahoma State's under a lot of scrutiny. They got a lot of sources coming out and saying all this stuff. It doesn't look good for the Cowboys right now.
Yeah, and they've taken the time even to go back to talk to Les Miles, the current coach for LSU, who was the coach at Oklahoma State back in the early 2000s when this team really started making their climb. And they interviewed him to if he would have any knowledge on it, and he was very cooperative. He was as shocked as anybody. He said, as long as I was there, it was a place of hard work. It was a place of honesty. We always, took academics very seriously. They always, they always pushed hard to help every player get their degree. And Les Miles, a very respected coach in the realm of college football. I honestly believe he knew nothing about this if this was even going on when he was there. You look at LSU. LSU has not had any issues like that since he's been there.
Yeah, I think Les Miles is clean as they come.
Yeah.
He's a well-respected coach around the nation.
Yeah, I don't think he had anything to do with it. I guess it's smart of them to go back and look, and look at this situation through him, because I think if anything, because you see with a lot of these guys, where does this stuff come out? It's always players that for whatever reason have ill feelings towards the university when they leave. You're never going to see, if it's a team with a star quarterback that goes pro, when he leaves, he's not going to rat out his university if he was treated well.
It's the kid that thought he should play and was better than somebody that didn't get it, and they always come out. And it seems like once one kid says something, a lot of other kids that are in that same situation will come out as well. It's just a snowball effect, and that's what we're seeing here at Oklahoma State. It's going to be interesting to see what the NCAA does. I think a lot of eyes are on them to see how they handle this situation, because they've been on a lot of scrutiny themselves the last few years about, they might have been too harsh to Penn State. They didn't do nothing to Miami for a lot of these same allegations that's going on with the Oklahoma State program. A lot of eyes are going to be on the NCAA to see what they do. And quite frankly, if they let this roll over and nothing happens, I think a lot of other schools around the nation are going to see this and be like, well, that's two programs in a row in the Hurricanes and Oklahoma State that have had serious allegations and had pretty strong evidence against them. Multiple people coming out and saying stuff and not doing anything about it. It'll be interesting to see how the NCAA handles it. Their officials are working hard, and that's play the waiting game and see what else comes out and see what happens from Oklahoma State moving forward.
And really, one of the other issues of this is all this information has been gathered from between 12 and 15 individuals, and they have used the names of over 40 former players and staff members. So it does not take a lot of people to get a story like this out. This is not a huge group of people. This is, as we said, just a few people who didn't like the way they were treated, at the university at their time. And really, it does not shock me so much that it's a team, like this, because, even as good as they are, they're relatively under the radar. Even when they're ranked, even when, this is not an Alabama, LSU. This is not a team that you're going to see people from out of the area be a fan of. This is a team that really had a lot of spotlight and didn't really have the attention. And I think a lot of the guys that maybe, were involved in this took that to their advantage. They're getting the perks of it, but not really the all eyes on you feeling. And I think that may have been what helped make this so easy to do and made it go on for so long.
Yeah, you see a lot of like huge schools like the Alabamas and the Oregons, even they had a scandal themselves. Nothing like this though. But you see, like, if somebody says this, it seems like there's so much supporters around that university, around that major university like Alabama, where not accusing them of nothing, not accusing Alabama of anything, but it seems like the fire gets put out very soon on it, right off the bat. Oklahoma State, a place like this, like you say, it's a big school, but it's not a Goliath of the college football world. When something comes out, it starts spiraling. We saw it years ago with SMU, and like I said, it'll be interesting to see what the NCAA does to Oklahoma State.
Well, it's definitely going to be interesting to see how this all plays out. We have one more game to get to here before we call it quits for the week. We have one more game with two ranked opponents against each other, and this, to me, is a very interesting matchup and can have a lot of situations to affect later on in the year as far as races for BCS bids and things of that nature. You have number 16 UCLA Bruins against number 23 Nebraska Horncutters. UCLA, as high as they've been in a very long time, do they keep the train rolling when they go to Nebraska to take on the Cornhuskers?
I do. I think Brett Hundley is very underrated. I think UCLA is on a roll right now, and especially with their crosstown rivals, USC, struggling so bad, they know this is a huge opportunity to keep the ball rolling in their favor, going to a place like Nebraska on the road and getting a big win. UCLA scores a lot of points. They have a high-octane offense, and we've seen in Nebraska the last few years, when they play a great offense and the one like UCLA has, they struggle a lot. Yes, they're going to be at home. That's going to help Nebraska a lot. But I happen to have UCLA in this game. Brett Hundley, he's a great quarterback. We'll see what he does. Taylor Martinez for Nebraska, he's been there for years. It'll be a game with two experienced quarterbacks. It'll be a great environment. I see UCLA pulling a huge one on the road.
Yeah, both these teams really have a lot to gain and really a lot to lose from this game because if they're going to make any real headway in the national title or BCS bowl, they're going to have to run the table or come extremely close to really make.
It's not like the SEC with these two schools. They're going to have to run the table. You can't lose a game of this magnitude and then just jump right back in it. That's why these games are so huge in these non-SEC teams as well.
Yeah, and Nebraska, they've been at this level for a while. They've been ranked. They've been top 15, team for a while. They've been in big games. UCLA is relatively new to the scene, at least in recent years. Is there any chance that UCLA, the spotlight's too big for them, or do you think they can handle it?
I think on the shoulder of the quarterback now. I think he's a great quarterback. He's been in games like this. He's beaten USC. I think they're ready to take the next step. That's just my opinion. We'll have to see on Saturday. I don't think it's too big for UCLA. I really don't. I think they're getting a lot of the talent that usually goes to USC, and when you got that kind of talent, you can really make way with it, as we've seen in years past. And I think the train's rolling UCLA's direction, and I think the spotlight isn't too big for them. I think they'll go in there and play a great game.
Yeah, UCLA with the third highest passing offense in the nation, and then you look at a team like Nebraska, who's always known as very good defense. I think it could be, if does the offense get rolling or is the defense able to shut them down? I can agree with you. I think even though it's in Nebraska, I think UCLA has as good a chance as anybody to go in there and beat them. And if they do, I think it's really going to catapult them. They're already 16th. If they beat another ranked team, they'd be looking at a top 10.
Yeah, they'll start getting some momentum if they win this game.
Yeah, sure. I mean, this is as good of a team as we've seen since Dick Vermeil in the Rose Bowl back in those days with the Bruins. It's really nice to see a team like this that has been down for so long to build things up the right way. They're not a team. I hate to really take a stab at them for anything, but a team like Ole Miss who magically gets.
Yeah, that's interesting.
The best recruiting class in the world, just out of nowhere.
I mean, it's like with Ole Miss, it's like, all right, your three projected schools. Let's see. We got Alabama, we got Florida State, and we got Oregon. And where are you going? I'm gonna go to Ole Miss. You don't see that with UCLA.
Yeah, I'm not one to start things, but somebody's got to take a look at what's going on over there. That for them to get the recruits that they got out of nowhere, that looks like SMU all over again. If
that's
anything,
unbelievable.
So Ole Miss, we had to take a shot at you there. But who knows? Maybe you guys did it the right way. But UCLA, what my point of making that was, this is not a team that has just gone out and in one recruiting class got a lot of people to bring them up. This is a team that's gradually done it the right way and has really earned number 16 in the nation. And it'll be interesting to see if they can continue to climb.
Yeah, UCLA is a team that you can pull for. They always seem to be the little kid when it comes to UCLA, with USC out there.
Mm-hmm.
It's nice to see the ball rolling in their court. They took a lot of butt whoopings over the years out there, and now they get the ball rolling in their court. I think they're gonna cherish this moment. I think they'll be fired up. Nebraska's probably gonna get more headway because it's the Cornhuskers. I think UCLA's got a point to prove. I think they got an underrated quarterback that needs to get more hype around the nation and not just in the UCLA area. And I think they're going to carry that momentum to a big win on the road at Nebraska.
Well, we'll find out at noon on Saturday in Lincoln, Nebraska, when they take on the Cornhuskers. That's all we have for you today. But really quick before we go, I want to announce we've launched our Facebook site. So I want it's just search College Football Across the Nation on Facebook.com. Send us anything you like, questions, comments. You don't like what we're saying? Let us know. Come at me, bro. Tell me what you think. So let's hear that. Let's get questions, comments, concerns, anything to get you guys more involved in the show. And we'll catch you next week. Thank you guys for listening.